Hello, friends. So, I would like to discuss and deconstruct um, the myth of Eros and Psyche, and then also add my own personal interpretation to the myth. This is a Greek myth, it's pretty well known. Um, Eros is the Greek god of love. He is the son of Aphrodite, who is the Greek goddess of love. He's known as Cupid, also in Roman mythology. He's always depicted wearing wings, and he shoots arrows, right, to make people fall in love. Psyche, her name actually translates into soul, like the human soul. So if you think about it, psychology is really like the study of the soul. Psyche was a mortal young woman, and this is the myth of Psyche and Eros. This is like a really good image of Psyche that I like. So, Psyche lived with her father and two older sisters, and she was so beautiful that the goddess Aphrodite was jealous and sent her son Eros to make her repulsive to all men so she would never be loved. Really nice, huh? And so Eros, he had like two different kinds of arrows, right? He had the arrow that made people fall in love with each other, but he also had arrows that made people repulsed by each other. So the arrow of repulsion. So he goes and into Psyche's house and into her room while she's asleep. But when he actually sees her, he falls in love with her. And in some of the myths, it says he accidentally sticks himself with one of his own love arrows, but you get the idea. He falls in love with her. But he also makes it so that no other man will marry her. Okay, so time goes by, and the two other sisters get married. They marry well, but no man will marry Psyche, and her father doesn't understand. So he goes to see the Oracle of Apollo, and it should be noted that Apollo hates Eros, because Eros is pretty immature and has not been very good to other people, and has pissed a lot of people off, including Apollo. So the Oracle of Apollo tells Psyche's father that her fate is that she will be married to a winged beast, and that her father must take Psyche to this cliff on a mountain and leave her there for the beast to come and snatch her up. So her father doesn't want to do this, but it's fate, so he goes ahead and he takes Psyche to the mountain cliff and leaves her there, abandons her for the monster. So instead of being abducted by a monster, she is swept up by the wind and carried off to a majestic and enchanted palace in the sky. And it's completely beautiful, right? And there are all of these invisible servants there to make her happy and you know, care for her every whim and entertain her even. And so that night, she's lying in bed in the dark. Eros comes in through the window, and they make sweet love, and it's amazing. And then he tells her, that he wants to make her happy for the rest of her life. But the only thing he asks is that she never looks at him, that she never sees him. So, after a few weeks of this, Psyche asks Eros if she can visit her family because she misses her family. And Eros agrees to let her do this. But when she goes to visit her family and her sisters get jealous of her enchanted palace. And they remind her of what the oracle had told their father, that this was a winged beast, that this was a monster, that her husband was a monster. So this provoked Psyche's need to know the truth about her husband. To the point where that evening, while he was asleep, she got an oil lamp and a knife and approached him. But he wasn't a monster. He was a gorgeous man with wings. And then she falls in love with him. But at that point in time, some of the oil from the lamp fell on Eros's skin and woke him up. And he was furious. And he flies out the window and he's saying, "You're never going to see me again." So Psyche chased after him to try to catch him, and she fell out of the window, and she fell back to Earth. When she is back down on Earth, she is devastated, right? And the first thing she wants to do is kill herself. So she tries to do this in the river, but Pan, another mythological figure, he talks her out of it. And he tells her to go to Aphrodite's temple and beg her forgiveness. So Psyche, being the humble person she is like, yes, I'll do that. But in the meantime, on her way to Aphrodite's temple, Aphrodite is sending her torments of grief and anxiety to torture Psyche, essentially, and cause her to have mental and emotional anguish, right? So Psyche gets to Aphrodite's temple and she tries to pay penance, and finally she meets Aphrodite, and Aphrodite says, okay, so if you want my forgiveness and you want to see Eros again, you'll have to complete these 3 tasks I give you. And Psyche agrees. The first task is that she is to sort all the varieties of grain in a grain barn. And the second task is that she has to collect some golden fleece from these rams, which are not like normal rams. They're more like murderous rams. So, yeah. And the third challenge, or the third task, is to collect water in a goblet from the highest waterfall of the river Styx. Right? Okay, so for the first task, you can imagine a barn full of all these different grains like corn and barley and hops and, you name it, lentils, whatever. There's all these different little pieces of grain, and she's got to sort them by hand. So she's totally overwhelmed. She's like, this is going to take forever, And then all of a sudden, out of the dirt come these ants to help her, and they sort the grain. They help her sort the grain, and she gets the task completed. The second task, she hides from the rams because they're very dangerous, and she lies in wait, and finally the rams fall asleep, and then she carefully collects the golden fleece from the thorn bushes that they had passed through. So very clever. And then for the third task, she actually she came up on the waterfall of the river Styx, and an eagle swooped down and collected and fetched the water for her. So she got some help there. Okay, so after she completed the 3 tasks, Aphrodite was not happy, okay? So she decides to give Psyche a final, ultimate task. She tells Psyche that she has to go to Hades and ask the goddess of the underworld, whose name is Persephone, to put some of her beauty into a box. And then Psyche is supposed to take the box back to Aphrodite once Persephone puts the beauty in there. That's the task. So, Psyche is like pretty much totally desperate at this point and miserable, and she doesn't know any other way to get to Hades other than to die. So she climbs upon a tower with the intention of like throwing herself off the tower and dying to get to Hades. But as she's about to do this, she hears a voice, right? She hears a voice. And the voice tells her that there's another way. So the voice tells her that there's a cave that she can go to that connects to all these other caves. And the caves descend down into Hades. And the voice instructs her to bring 2 cakes that have like sleeping pills in them, and to bring 2 coins. And the voice says that she will be asked for her help 3 times. And 3 times she must refuse to help. And then finally, she's not allowed to open the box. She's not supposed to look inside the box once the beauty has been placed in there. It's supposed to go to Aphrodite. So Psyche finds the cave, follows it down to Hades, and the cake with the sleeping pill puts Cerberus, the 3-headed dog that guards Hades, to sleep. And then the coin was for Charon, the boatman who carries people across the river into Hades. So as she's in the boat crossing the river, there's a man who like his flesh is just like rotting off of his bones. And he's begging her. He says, can I hold your hand and you can carry me across so I can get to Hades? I didn't have any coins to give the boatman. So now I'm just like, I'm stuck in this river and I'm just trying to cross over. But Psyche tells him no. She has to tell him no. And then, so finally she actually meets Persephone. And Persephone is very kind and happy to help. And so she goes ahead and puts some of her beauty into the box and gives the box back to Psyche. So Psyche makes it out of Hades. But on the way back to Aphrodite, she starts thinking that maybe Eros is going to think that she's not as beautiful as she was before, because all of this has taken a toll on her, And she starts to worry that Eros won't find her as beautiful as he once did. And so she thinks, well, what's the harm if I just like peek inside of this box, right? I'll just open it just slightly and just get a little tiny bit of beauty out. No one will notice. So she opens the box and peeks inside, and Morpheus, the god of sleep and dreams, he comes out and basically puts her into a state of like unconsciousness, like similar to a coma, right? It's at this point that Eros, he's been watching Psyche and all that she's been going through. And his burn is now healed. And he doesn't care anymore about what his mother thinks. He flies down to her. He grabs the box, brings the box to Aphrodite, and this completes the task. And then he grabs Psyche and brings her up to Mount Olympus, and Zeus revives her. And then Eros asks Zeus to make her immortal. And Zeus said yes. So she eats ambrosia, and then they live forever together. the soul, and the embodiment of love. And then here's an image of her walking out of Hades once she's collected the beauty in the box. And here's Cerberus, and there's Charon, the boatman. So some symbology that I want to point out. So for anyone who has ever indoctrinated it by Disney movies, like indoctrinated into the whole idea of like, oh, you know, only a true love's kiss can break the spell, or any of that. Now you kind of know where that comes from. So Psyche is humble, and she's got these two sisters that aren't, you know. And Aphrodite, being a goddess, she wants to punish Psyche out of jealousy. And she wants to punish Psyche for existing. So this makes me think of like Snow White and Cinderella, just like having an evil mother figure, right? And then her marriage to a winged beast, the enchanted palace, the invisible servants, and the forbidden knowledge aspect. That's totally Beauty and the Beast. The lamp represents the illumination, like, of knowledge. So it's classical illumination. The knife represents discernment of truth. So Psyche pursued the truth with traditional masculine tools, right? So when Eros gets burned by the oil, he thinks he's like been betrayed. He thinks that Psyche is like disloyal or mistrustful. And I mean, really what happened is that he's butthurt because his own wife wanted to see what he looked like. So make of that what you will. Psyche suffers after this because she becomes aware of what she lacks, and that includes self-love. So I think that Psyche is a high FE user, and that Eros is like an ISFP, for instance, which would make her an ESFJ. So she gets a taste of that self-love and that those feelings, that shadow side, and then it's immediately gone. So sorting the grain, that's a task of patience, right? So that's SI. Gathering the golden fleece was a test of wits, or TI. And then getting the water from the river, Styx, she had to use her intuition, and she had to use nature, right? Now the Hades challenge was totally different, because that was the, you know, quote, dark night into the soul. That was the internal challenge, right? She had to venture into other sides of her mind that were previously unknown to her, right? It represents like what's below the surface. You know, the Hades is the underworld, right? And sometimes that involves, you know, going through, you know, like re-experiencing traumatic memories and working out just inner demons. So like all the work is happening below the surface. And it appears as if nothing is happening, but actually a lot is happening. It's just below the surface. So the part where she has to refuse to help 3 times is actually really important, because if she had given her hand to the man in the river, she might have dropped some of the supplies that she needed. And like, because she was in Hades and it's the dark night of the soul, she had to kind of reserve her strength for herself. She had to learn to say no and put herself first, right? That's a hard thing to do for a high FE user, right? So this really applies to people who suffer from like codependency, even addiction and depression, right? learning to have self-love and put yourself first, and saying no, and saying I have to solve my own problems before I can help anyone else, right? So Persephone represents the benevolent goddess found within ourselves. And she's the only woman who actually helps Psyche in the whole story. Opening of the box and the punishment from Morpheus. So, every other interpretation of this myth says that she is punished for her curiosity. Okay? And how often have we come across that in mythology, right? Pandora, her curiosity, like, she led to her opening the box, and all the evil of the world is due to Pandora being curious, and Eve's curiosity, like, she ate the apple because she was curious, and now we're all suffering. Like, oh, I just think that's bullshit. I think the reason that Psyche was punished is because she had gone through this thing, this dark night of the soul, and she had found a sense of herself, right? And she had met the goddess within, and the wisdom and the knowledge of the goddess was the real prize, right? The beauty in the box was the red herring. So wisdom and aging tend to go together, right? As you get older, you gain more wisdom. But as you get older, you tend to lose your beauty, right? So, and also, when you gain a sense of self, that sense of self does not adhere to the male gaze, okay? It does not exist to be beautiful, right? The self exists for its own sake. So by her, like, looking into the box and pursuing that beauty, it's like she was after the wrong thing, you know? It's like she was regressing, you know? It's like, you know, she didn't realize that having that inner goddess inside, having that inner wisdom and knowledge and sense of self is way more attractive than any kind of beauty in the box, right? And that's why she was punished. So in my interpretation, Eros represents her shadow. And so she had been totally unaware of her shadow. Like, she was in her ego completely in the beginning. And then she had this encounter with her shadow, and then it became elusive to her. And only through, like, trials and suffering did she finally find it again, right? And when Morpheus put her into a deep slumber, you know, when we're sleeping, that's kind of when our unconscious mind communicates to us in the form of dreams and things like this. So that's kind of like the merging of the two. But basically the whole idea is that the ego and the shadow become aware of each other on a conscious level, right? That you can access that shadow. So I wanted to discuss something called the Heroine's Journey. But in order to understand the Heroine's Journey, you first have to understand the hero's journey. So the hero's journey was a term coined by Joseph Campbell, and because these stages, this same set of things that happen in this order, like, happen ubiquitously, and it's so prolific throughout cultures and myths and time and stories that it's like a monomyth, basically. It's any kind of story where there's a protagonist and they have to, like, face challenges and overcome something. you could basically apply the hero's journey to that story. So I just use the Matrix as an example. So, okay, it starts off in the ordinary world. So the yellow is the known world, and the purple is the unknown or the special world. So we start off in the ordinary world. Neo, we know he's a nerd. He's like always on his computer, you know, he's a hermit or whatever. He has a call to adventure. It's the second step. He's contacted by Trinity. And then there's the refusal of the call. So, like, there's that scene where he's like on the ledge on the outside of the skyscraper, and he's like, no, I can't do this. And he like retreats. And then the next stage is meeting of the mentor, who is Morpheus. And then stage 5 is like crossing the threshold into the special world. So that's red pill versus blue pill, right? Tests, allies, enemies. So this is like when he's practicing like jumping like from building to building, and he's like learning karate, and like there's like the woman with the red dress. So yes, tests, allies, enemies. Approaching the innermost cave. So this is actually when the oracle tells him that he's not the one. The ordeal is when he has to go back to the Matrix with Trinity to save Morpheus, because Morpheus was kidnapped, and they go in guns blazing. The reward. So the reward for Neo was the discovery that he can also move like the agents move in the Matrix. The road back is difficult for Neo because Cypher killed Dozer and wounded Tank. So Neo is outnumbered, and it looks like he's, you know, pretty much done. And then resurrection, he wakes up, he's able to stop the bullets midair, and he kills the agent, right? And then return with elixir. So he doesn't have any elixir, but the elixir in this case would be his, you know, just him, because he's proof that a human could defeat an agent in the Matrix. So he gives hope for humanity over machines. That's the elixir that he brings back. And like I said, you can apply this to, you know, pretty much any kind of story involving a protagonist. Even the story of Jesus Christ, like, you can apply this to. So, Maureen Murdock is a woman who wrote a book called The Heroines Journey in the 1980s. And she wrote it from the perspective of the modern woman, who is no longer the treasure to be gained by the hero, right? So what is her journey, you know? So the first step, or the first stage, is splitting from the feminine. Because we live in a patriarchy, we are indoctrinated to reject nature and to, you know, reject like emotionality, right? And women are basically praised when they behave more like men. Men are typically scolded for behaving like women because they're lowering their status, right? And everything that is considered valuable in our society, value is defined by men, right? Because we live in a patriarchy. So we are just cut off from the feminine automatically. The identification with the masculine. So like, pretty much every protagonist is male, right? So we have to take on that male protagonist mindset, persona. And we have to get careers, right? And we have to make money and compete with men and suppress our emotions. And this is all part of survival, because especially in the US, both parents have to work to support a family. So the next stage is to gather allies. This could be education, training, support, work experience, anything to advance the woman's career. Road of trials. These are the dragons and demons, right? So these are like external struggles in the world. Having to have a career while also maintaining a family, right? Working 40 hours a week and cleaning the house and raising the kids, doing everything, trying to be super mom, and also paying for everything, right? And still not getting promoted, right? And then also you have to be sexy when you're needed to be sexy, and the breadwinner when you're needed to be the breadwinner, and the mechanic sometimes when you have to be the mechanic, and the plumber and the electrician, and you're just supposed to do it all. And on top of that, you also have impossible beauty standards enforced upon you, where models have to be anorexic to fit into those standards. So, any kind of weight gain is not allowed. You are supposed to be at the gym. Any moment of free time that you get and you're not at the gym, shame on you, right? Shame on you. You shouldn't be gaining any weight. Impossible standards, okay? Impossible tasks. Boon of success. So this is when, a woman has like attained, quote, success. She's the CEO, right? She's made a lot of money. She's got the big house and the family and the husband and the cars. And yet she finds that she is not happy. She feels like there is something wrong, that there's something missing, right? She doesn't know what it is. She's just dissatisfied. And then spiritual aridity. This is when the woman feels disconnected, disoriented, burned out, hollow inside, unhappy, and she starts to sink into a depression or other mental illness. So the purple is the unknown, right? So to get out of spiritual aridity, which is where pretty much every woman kind of winds up, mental illness. Initiation and descent to the goddess. This is the internal search for the self, right? Facing the unknown, which is the unconscious mind or the subconscious mind. Becoming aware that you have 4 sides of your mind, for instance, and things that you have pushed away, right? Emotions you've suppressed, right? Trauma that you may have experienced in the past, right? So this search is not a pretty one, right? It's not comfortable. It can be very difficult, right? It's hard, but eventually you discover deep down inside of you the sacred feminine, because you are a woman, and therefore you are a carrier of the sacred feminine. All of us are masculine and feminine together, but as a woman, you do carry the sacred feminine inside of you, in your psychological mind and soul. And for a lot of women, this involves goddess archetypes and the use of goddess archetypes as guides, right? And this does work. Now, some people choose to be like Wiccan or pagan, okay? And those are more of like your Celtic gods and goddesses. I would stay away from the Greek gods and goddesses because they're just like awful people in general. But the Eastern goddesses, like the ones from India, are very interesting. Very interesting. And they could be a great help to you. So then after you find this goddess inside you, there's this urgent need to reconnect to the feminine. So you start like embracing all these things that you sacrifice to be a masculine person. So you start wanting to be alone in nature, or being more sexy, or like cooking or sewing or crafts, or just like doing these things that feel feminine to you. Then there's the healing of the mother-daughter wound. The goddess inside is the mother, the great mother, right? So is the earth. So when you connect to nature, when you connect to the goddess, you are healing that wound, right? No matter what kind of relationship you have with your own mother, the earth is the great mother, right? And finding that wisdom is a way to heal that. Now, healing the wounded masculine, that is the animus that is within the woman, right? Because when you allow that animus to become overbearing, it's over-punishing, and it's a brute, So you have to tame it and make it hold its place and protect us when we need it, but hold its place. And then the goal, the outcome, is the integration of masculine and feminine to find that balance so we can feel whole, right? Because it's all about being in balance. So if we're going to talk about Psyche, what is her heroine's journey? So split from the feminine. So she did not have a loving mother. She had mean sisters. She lived in a patriarchal society, and she was hated and cursed by Aphrodite, right? I would say that's a pretty big split. She identified with masculine. So this is when she used the knife and the lamp to try to solve a problem, because this is a masculine way of going about something, right? This is an action that she takes. And then there are the road of trials. So the emotional pain and anguish, along with the 3 tests that are impossible to perform. The gathering of allies. So, she had the ants help her, the eagle helping her, nature. The boon of success. So even after she completes these 3 impossible tasks, she is still suffering, right? Like, she still doesn't have Eros. And she's told she has to go to Hades, It's still not enough, right? She's still not enough. That's the message, right? You're not enough. Spiritual aridity. So this is when she's climbing the tower and ready to die, because she doesn't know what else to do, and she doesn't have anything to live for anyway. She's desperate. Initiation and descent to the goddess. So at the point when she hears the voice in her head, and today if a woman said that she heard a voice, she would be immediately detained against her will in a psych ward. Okay? But this voice saved her life. And this voice told her what to do and gave her the information she needed and helped her, gave her some help, right? So that she didn't have to die. And then when she gets into Hades, she meets this goddess of the underworld, Persephone, who is kind to her, right? And who helps her and who is on her side. And then the urgent yearning to reconnect to the feminine, I think this correlates with Persephone, Persephone. I wrote Persephone, but it's Psyche. I think this correlates to when Psyche looks into the box. Because she's thinking about being beautiful for Eros, right? And so she can't resist opening the box, right? But that's the problem, because we affiliate wisdom with, we don't affiliate wisdom with beauty, right? Because wisdom goes along with aging, and we think, well, if you're aging, you're losing your beauty. But gaining a sense of self and gaining wisdom and knowledge is a form of beauty in and of itself, right? Healing the mother-daughter wound. And so when Eros intervenes, he gives the box to Aphrodite. This completes the task, right? This releases her from bondage. And Psyche gets to keep the knowledge that she has gained, the wisdom. Healing the wounded masculine. This is when, like, Eros's burn has been healed, and he's forgiven her for the so-called betrayal of her looking at him. And then the integration of masculine and feminine. Psyche was transformed into a goddess herself, and then they could be together on a conscious level, right? Without hiding from each other, right? This is like ego and shadow integration, and on a conscious level. So that is my interpretation of this myth. So you can interpret it as a love story. It's written as a love story, right? But I think it's more than just a love story. I think it's actually about a woman who is trying to find who she is, and she'll go to any lengths to find it, because she needs to know, right? And this image is really great because Psyche is associated with the butterfly, because the butterfly, the caterpillar goes into the cocoon, right? Looks like nothing's happening, but then comes out a butterfly. So that's her going into Hades, being in the cocoon. Here she's got the lamp, right? And the knife. And then this is like the tower. This is the box that she opened when Morpheus came out, I guess. This is the bird that fetched the water. Murderous ram with a golden fleece. And I think there's like an ant somewhere over here. It's hard to see. But yeah, it's a really cool image, and I like the expression on her face, because I know what that feels like. So, if you like my interpretation of this myth, if you find it to be helpful or enlightening, just give me an indication, like a thumbs up. I contacted a therapist in my area. It was the only therapist that I could find who used Jungian psychology in her work as a psychologist and therapist, right? I contacted her to help for my own sake, right? And I asked her, well, if she, I was just asking general questions, and she said that she charges $125 per 50-minute session, right? She does not take insurance. And I was like, okay, what do I know about Carl Jung? And what do I know about the usage of archetypes and myths in healing people of mental illness and trauma and things like this, right? So I'm hoping that this is helpful to people who are in dark stages of their lives and who need to be in a transitory stage, right? They need to convert it into a transition, right? And hopefully, myths like this one can show you how to do that. It's totally possible. So hang in there, and yeah, have a good day.